It's not the loud betrayals that break us. It's the quiet ones, the ones that come dressed as care. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths. And when they finally decide to speak, everything changes. You could hear the brushing of leaves outside the window, the smell of freshly folded cotton sheets still lingering in the hallway, and the distant clanking of dishes downstairs. It should have been comforting. It was her house, after all. But for Eleanor Maddox, 67, just home from surgery, everything felt wrong. The silence, once her companion, now screamed. The couch had been moved. Her favorite reading lamp, gone. The framed photograph of Scout, her dog, her shadow for the past 10 years, was missing from the hallway table. Her chest tightened as she pulled herself from the recliner, the post-operative pain forgotten for now buried under something sharper. "Where's Scout?" she asked, her voice tentative, barely resting on her breath. There was no bark, no warm nose against her palm, no excited paws on tile. Amanda's voice, confident and far too polished, slithered up the stairs. "Oh, Eleanor. We thought it would. Be kinder ... while you recovered." Eleanor gripped the stair railing. "Kind?" Amanda appeared at the foot of the stairs, arms folded like she was easing into a PowerPoint presentation at work. Her son Christopher stood behind her, not meeting Eleanor's eyes. "You got rid of him?" Eleanor's voice cracked. Christopher finally looked at her, his voice so gentle it hurt to hear. "He was always jumping on the bed, tripping you. Amanda Shea made a hard decision for your safety." For her safety, he spoke of Scout like a threat, like a liability, like a problem to be solved. The ache Eleanor felt now wasn't surgical. It was the realization something had shifted while she was under wraps. Something deep. Before we dive deeper into Eleanor's story, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. If you've ever felt quiet betrayal, if you've ever questioned your role in your own home, or if you know someone who needs a reminder of their power, this story is for you. Like, share. And let's show that no one is too old to reclaim what's theirs. Eleanor had always been the one everyone leaned on, a widow for nearly 12 years. She had turned heartache into habit, baking banana bread for neighbors every Saturday, knitting blankets for hospital charities, rescuing a dog no one wanted because he barked too loudly. That was Scout. Loud, stubborn, loyal. Just like her. Her sister once joked, in her absence, just a 3-week recovery after a hysterectomy, her world had been reordered. Amanda and Christopher had moved in to help. Or so they said. Help looked strangely like control, her Staffordshire. Dining table was swapped for a lighter, more modern acrylic one. Eleanor's mother's porcelain set, once protected in a display case, had vanished. Her shelves were neater, sure, but empty. Sanitized like she hadn't been living there for almost 3 decades. She walked slowly, her cane catching slightly on the new carpet in the study. She found the first evidence, her bank statements printed and highlighted. Purse receipts stapled to pages. Subscriptions she'd never approved. Furniture deliveries, food boxes. Baby items Amanda and Chris didn't even have children. Eleanor didn't say anything that night. She just sat in bed, silently scrolling. Through old pictures of her and Scout, she stopped when she saw the one from last Christmas, Scout beneath the tree. Santa hat around his ears, that same dumb look he always had when she made him pose. Her fingers lingered on the screen. No more barking. No more clicking, paws on wood floor. No more Scout lying at the foot of her bed, hurting her from nothing and everything. She couldn't sleep. The next morning, Amanda greeted her with fake. "Sunshine, I've made you lemon tea," she chirped, placing the cup beside her breakfast tray. "Oh, and hope you don't mind. We cleaned out the laundry room. It's too many toxins for your recovery." It was painted over. Sterile Scout's basket was gone. So was his leash. Amanda's eyes smiled, but her mouth was stiff. Christopher avoided. Breakfast altogether, something in Eleanor snapped into place, then not rage, not grief, but a question louder than both. How much had she let go while trying to stay grateful? She waited until they left the house that afternoon. Christopher had mentioned an open house they were curious about, some upgraded apartment downtown. Eleanor sat at her desk and searched. She found the rescue center where she'd adopted Scout years ago, then traced the number they likely used for his intake. After several calls, a vague woman replied, "Yes, Scout. Came in recently. An older mix. Claimed his owner surrendered. Says the owner has a progressing mental condition." Eleanor leaned back, dizzy. "Did the person who surrendered him sign any papers?" she asked. "Amanda Collins." They had lied about her health, robbed her dog, redecorated her home, eaten her food, altered her accounts, and now painted her as incompetent. That night, Eleanor walked slowly to the study again. This time, she opened Amanda's important documents box. Beneath insurance printouts and brochures for retirement, condos, she found it. The signed surrender form. Amanda had checked the box. Owner permanently unable to care for animal due to mental incapacity. Her signature was forged. Eleanor sat there for a long time, not crying, not even angry, calculating. Eleanor had made a decision, and with it, a quiet shift occurred inside her. She didn't yell at Christopher. She didn't confront Amanda. With tears or rage, she simply went to her room that night and made a list. A real, handwritten list on one of those monogrammed cards Amanda had bought for thank you notes, now ironically useful. 2 columns. One titled, "Taken," the other "Mine." Undertaken, Scout bedroom furniture, dining set, control of grocery orders. Respect my narrative under mine. The house, my accounts, Scout's microchip. Time, the truth, her hand didn't shake once. She put the pen down and stared at the list. She'd faced loss before: her husband to heart failure, her mother to dementia, her sister to silence after a falling out. But this feeling was different. This wasn't loss. This was erasure. And Eleanor Maddox had never been the type to vanish. Quietly, the next morning, she made 2 calls. The first was to Marjorie, her old friend from church and a retired lawyer. It had been years since they spoke, but Eleanor didn't hesitate. After she shared the basics, Marjorie answered only with, "Want me to come over this afternoon?" The second call was harder. She dialed the new owner of Scout the shelter had given her the name Leah Hampton. Leah taught special education, mid-30s, lived a town over. Eleanor introduced herself gently, trying not to seem accusatory. "Miss Hampton, I know this might seem strange, but Scout was my dog for 10 years. I just had surgery, and while I was recovering, someone surrendered him without my knowledge." There was a heavy pause on the other end. Then Leah asked, "Was he the one with the crooked tail and the howl-like bark?" Eleanor laughed softly, a tear suddenly burning its way down. "Yes, that ridiculous howl. Like he's auditioning for a horror movie every night?" Leah hesitated. "I can't imagine what that felt like. I'd want answers to. Maybe we can work something out." Her voice was gentle, empathetic. "Would you like to visit him this weekend?" Eleanor nodded in speechless gratitude, counting the things she was slowly reclaiming. Marjorie arrived that afternoon with a folder, thicker than the kitchen Bible, and a scowl that could slice drywall. "They've logged into your accounts. This furniture was purchased using your debit card, not theirs. And there's more recurring mobile charges, retail deliveries, even a wine club membership. None of these were documented prior to your hospital stay." Eleanor sat back in the armchair Amanda had chosen for her. It didn't fit her body. "It's too wide, too stiff. Can I kick them out?" she asked plainly. Marjorie didn't flinch. "We'll do better. We'll give them a choice to stay if they pay rent." Eleanor smiled. This wasn't vengeance. This was remembering whose name was on the deed. The house felt different that night, expectant, like it was watching her reclaim herself one breath at a time. Amanda entered the kitchen while Eleanor was making tea. "Oh, you're up late. Couldn't sleep," Eleanor said without turning. She liked jasmine at night. Scout used to curl. At her feet when she brewed it, Amanda leaned against the counter, fishing for harmony. "Chris said you've been a bit ... distant. I'm thinking," Eleanor replied. Amanda sipped the silence, then added sweetly, "You've been through so much, Eleanor. I just want to make things easier." Eleanor turned, teacup in hand, eyes sharp. "Are you helping, Amanda? Or replacing?" Next morning, Christopher found a letter on the breakfast table. No confrontation, just business. It stated that beginning next month, Amanda and Christopher would either sign a rental agreement or vacate the premises. A lawyer's contact was listed below for any clarifications. Amanda's toast turned cold in her hand. Christopher looked at his mother, stunned. "Is this what you want?" Eleanor carefully placed her napkin on her lap before answering. "I want peace. What I had was intrusion." She got up calmly, walking back to the garden where Scout once loved digging holes that ruined her begonias. Amanda followed after her, voice rising. "We acted out of love. You can't just flip a switch on us. Like that. We helped Ty clean your house." Alona stopped and turned. "You erased me." It hung there, unapologetic, sharp as truth ought to be. That Saturday, Eleanor took a cab to Leia's house. Leia opened the door in slippers, and before any words were spoken, Scout was at the front, leaping down the steps like a soldier rediscovering home. He barked, then howled. One long, ridiculous sound that made Leia laugh and Eleanor cry into her coat sleeve. She knelt as gently as her joints allowed, and Scout pressed into her like a living memory. Leia led them inside, holding Eleanor's elbow as though she knew. Eleanor barely needed help, but still deserved the gesture. "He's happy here," Leia said gently. Eleanor nodded. "I see that. But he remembers you." Over homemade muffins, Eleanor shared details of Scout's younger days, the time he chased a squirrel up an actual tree, his knack for knowing when the doorbell would ring, the way he slept with his paw over her foot. Leia listened with tenderness, said the thing that restored something inside Eleanor: "You raised him well. You still belong to part of his heart." They agreed on a shared guardianship. Scout would visit Eleanor every weekend. Leia would drive, no drama. No paperwork even, just trust forged through truth. Eleanor got home that evening and walked into her room. She looked at her phone still, full of unanswered texts from Amanda and Christopher. She opened her contacts and deleted both. Then she changed her background to that old Christmas photo of Scout, looking unimpressed in a Santa hat. The silence was hers again. This time, it brought peace, calculating. By the following week, Amanda's tone had shifted like a cold front slipping under a thin door crack. Gone were the chirpy greetings and cloying. Sympathy in their place grew irritation, and something sharper, fear masquerading as pride. "You're overreacting," Eleanor Amanda snapped one morning over coffee. "We're family, families take care of each other." "Yes," Eleanor said evenly, "they do." She folded the rental agreement and slid it across the dining table. The table Amanda had picked, the one Eleanor never liked. Her fingers brushed its edge like a deliberate decision. And sometimes families set boundaries so everyone knows their place. Amanda blinked, lips twitching like she might laugh or scream. But her eyes, those flickered. Christopher stood beside her, caught like paper in the middle of a fire. "Why are you being so transactional?" he asked, wounded, in the way only the guilty could afford to be. "What was your transaction with my dog?" Eleanor asked, voice calm as wind in a hallway. Another silence, another victory. Marjorie returned that afternoon to help Eleanor sort her digital accounts and passwords. They spent hours unraveling the digital fingerprints Amanda and Chris had left. "Monthly cleaning subscriptions," Marjorie muttered. "Fancy soap boxes from Europe?" "Eleanor, they were nesting here." "Not helping. I offered them a home during a hard season," Eleanor said. "I didn't offer up my identity." Together, they changed access to bank portals, updated security settings, canceled more than a dozen unnoticed subscriptions. With each click, Eleanor felt something growing taller inside her again, roots straightening under decades of careful pruning. They shared tea in the living room later. This time, sitting in chairs Eleanor had chosen brought back from the garage, polished and restored to where they belonged. "You're getting your house back," Marjorie smiled. "No," Eleanor corrected softly. "I'm getting me back, Christopher." Handed her the signed rental agreement 2 days later with jittery hands. Amanda didn't come downstairs. "We'll stay until the end of the month," he muttered. Then, ... we'll leave. Eleanor nodded, not unkind, but firm. "I appreciate it." There was so much left unsaid. About what it meant to fail as a son. About not seeing his mother as a woman with edges, not just arms. But Eleanor didn't speak those thoughts aloud. They weren't for him. Later that night, she stood in front of her closet, half of her clothes still gone. Amanda had vacuum sealed and boxed them, labeled "Donate." Like the contents of a motel's lost and found. Eleanor pulled out a yellow cardigan she hadn't worn in 2 years. It smelled faintly of cedar and old perfume. She held it to her chest and let herself sit with the unfairness of everything they'd assumed. Then she folded it neatly and placed it back. Whispering, "Not lost, reclaimed." On their final weekend in the house, Amanda approached her. In the kitchen, the air was full of cinnamon cookies Eleanor had baked that morning, not for guests. "Just for herself." "You've changed, Eleanor," Amanda said, failing to hide the accusation. Eleanor stirred her tea. The clink of the spoon echoing with intention, double quotes, "No." "I remembered." Amanda frowned. "Remembered what?" "What?" "Being quiet isn't the same thing as being weak." Amanda crossed her arms, defiant. "You're pushing us out?" Eleanor turned to her slowly. "And you ... moved yourselves in. That was never asked for. That was assumed. You erased your way into my peace." Amanda exhaled sharply, then laughed bitterly. "You'll be alone again? Don't come crawling to us when you realize no one visits." Eleanor stepped forward. Not angry, composed. "I'd rather be alone on my terms than surrounded by people who turn love into currency." Amanda didn't respond. What could she say to that? Once Amanda and Christopher moved out, Eleanor took a full afternoon to clean that out of anger. But ceremony, the act of wiping down drawers, opening attic boxes, pulling her grandmother's blue china set back into the dining room, it all felt sacred. A way to restore herself in layers. She played old records as she rearranged furniture. Billie Holiday, Patsy Cline, women whose voices trembled with sorrow but never shattered. Outside, late autumn wind stirred acorns across her porch. Inside, Eleanor brewed coffee, placed the photo of her late husband back on the mantel, wiped away the dust Amanda had never noticed, smiled at it like a partner in a long game. "I took the long way around," she whispered, "but I got here." It was the first night in weeks she slept without locking her door. The next morning, she received a message from Leah. "Scout's missing your cookies. Mind if we crash Sunday morning?" Eleanor wrote back faster than she meant to. "Only if he helps me with the crossword." She lowered her phone, heart full not from a full house, but from the integrity of an honest one. Scout's visits on weekends became their rhythm. Leah was good company, quiet, respectful. She always brought fresh flowers and stayed just long enough. Sometimes they sipped coffee on the porch without needing to speak much. Eleanor learned how to rest in her own presence again. The house, no longer a battleground, became a sanctuary once more. And in a final gesture, quiet but definitive, she walked into Amanda's old room, now empty, and sealed it shut with a soft-colored door sign. "Room available month-to-month rental. Respect required." Later that week, her new tenant moved in. Dana, a traveling nurse temporarily stationed at the local clinic. She was 29, cautious, kind-eyed, paid rent on time. She didn't borrow Eleanor's things without asking, didn't comment on her habits, didn't redecorate anything that wasn't hers. One evening, Dana brought home a bouquet of sunflowers and placed them on the kitchen counter with a note. "Thanks for the space. Feels like home." Eleanor smiled. Home, not inherited, not overtaken, not hijacked. Offered. Accepted. Respected. 2 weeks after Amanda and Chris had left, Eleanor stood in her kitchen at dawn, barefoot on the cold tile. A mug of dark coffee warming both palms. The house no longer echoed with other people's footsteps. No passive-aggressive heels on tiles. No hovering in doorways. It's just her own breathing, her own thoughts. The silence no longer screamed. It hummed. She had started a morning ritual light incense. Open the blinds. Step outside barefoot for exactly 1 minute, just to feel the earth. It was something she hadn't done in years. Not since her husband passed. Back then, it had all felt too quiet. It's too big. Now. The space felt earned. Eleanor looked around and smiled at herself in the hallway mirror. I see you, she whispered, then moved on with her day. Scout began. Arriving every Sunday morning, Leah would park out front, not twice, and then let Scout bound in with all the delicacy of a bowling ball in a flower shop. Cookies, belly rubs, puzzles, coffee, these were the rituals they shared. More than that, though, Scout brought back something Eleanor hadn't realized was missing. Laughter, the belly deep, eye-crinkling kind. It's the kind that opened the lungs as wide as they could stretch. One afternoon, as Scout flopped upside down beside her chair, legs twitching mid-dream, Leah asked, "Do you ever wish things had gone differently with your son?" Eleanor took a deep breath. I used to. She sipped her tea, eyes drawn to a photo on the mantel. Chris at age 6, hugging a scruffy, stuffed monkey. But now, she paused. Now I think I wish I'd spoken up sooner. I kept trying to keep the peace. But peace isn't silence. Peace is truth with love. And I only gave the silence. Leah smiled at that. And look at you now. You're doing both. Mid-November brought gold leaves and slow afternoons. One Friday, Eleanor baked a pie just because she could, with cinnamon sugar on top, her late husband's favorite. She wrapped it neatly and carried it next door to her neighbor, Helen's house. They hadn't seen much of each other since Eleanor's surgery, and Helen's eyes widened at the sight of her on the porch. Well, if it isn't the long-lost matriarch? Helen teased. Eleanor laughed. Thought I'd bring something from the vault? Over warm pie slices and idle chatter, the two shared stories, swapped recipes. And for the first time in a long while, Eleanor spoke freely about everything. What happened with Amanda? The forged document. The stolen dog. The way fear had crept. In wearing kindness as its mask, Helen shook her head. So many women our age are taught to just be nice, even when we're drowning. Eleanor nodded slowly. I think I got confused between being kind and being passive. And there it was, True, sipping tea beside her, finely dressed in her own clothes. That night, Eleanor started writing. Not a novel, not a blog. Just short entries in her notebook. Journal pages titled, Things I Thought I Lost. Things They Can't Take. Things I'm Still Becoming. Some were lists, others full paragraphs. One page simply read, Scout still loves me. Silence isn't the enemy. I'm allowed to start again. I will never apologize for reclaiming my space. She placed the journal by her bedside, next to her clock and a lavender spray she used to help sleep. For the first time in months, she drifted off without replaying anything. No looping conversations. No what-ifs. Just rhythm and rest. Freedom has a particular warmth on the skin once you remember how to wear it. Around Thanksgiving, Dana surprised her with dinner. I know you don't do the full spread anymore, she said, standing in the doorway with a tin dish and flighty smile, but you opened your home to me, so I figured ... You deserve to be cooked for. It was cranberry glazed chicken over wild rice, with roasted carrots. Eleanor blinked at her. No one's cooked for me in a very long time. Dana shrugged. You cooked a roof over my head. Seemed fair. They sat at the kitchen table, shared the simple, perfect meal, and toasted with sparkling water in unmatched glasses. I thought I was beyond the years of feeling useful. Eleanor said mid-bite. Dana looked up, sincere. Miss Eleanor, you make people feel calm just by standing next to them. Silence again this time. Not cutting, but profound. And earned quiet across the table in the place Amanda had once claimed. How sad. Someone who saw her not as frail or in the way but as rooted. Was Ho. One evening, Eleanor lit an old candle. The scent was called Beach House. She'd bought it 10 years ago and never burned it, saving it for something special. She chuckled to herself and shook her head. What was I waiting for? A royal visit? She lit the candle and sat in its soft, ocean-salted scent. Scout lay curled nearby. Leia had brought him for an overnight that weekend, and he dozed just feet away. Eleanor sipped wine. Dana was upstairs on a video call with her fiancé outside. Christmas lights began appearing along fence lines. The world hadn't changed, dramatically, but Eleanor had, and that made all the difference. That night, scrolled her phone, Curious Sand opened Amanda's old messages. She didn't miss them, but she did need closure. She typed a single message. No venom, just truth. I hope you find what you're looking for out there, but this is no longer your nest. I haven't lost my mind. I've simply remembered it. Then she blocked the number. Peace isn't always hugs and reunions. Sometimes it's the delete button. Sometimes it's a clean table. Sometimes it's knowing you don't have to shout to prove your whole. In early December, Eleanor did something she hadn't done in years. She bought a set of watercolor paints and began to sketch in the mornings. Her hand trembled at first, not from age or weakness, but from unfamiliar permission. Permission to create, to express, to take up space, for no other reason than joy. The first painting was of Scout. Of course, his ears always slightly lopsided, as if permanently curious. She didn't try to get the details perfect, just the emotion. That little tilt in his head whenever she'd say his name. She pinned it above the fireplace. Not perfect, but real. And no one could take it down this time. When she ran into an old friend from the library committee at the market, the woman gasped at the sight of her. Eleanor Maddox. I thought you moved to assisted living or something. Eleanor laughed loud, jaw open loud, double quotes. No, just took a little detour back to myself. They spent 5 minutes catching up by the oranges and before partying. Eleanor caught herself saying something she hadn't said in a long time. We should meet for lunch sometime. She meant it, not to perform, not to prove she was functioning, but because, at long last, her tank was no longer bone dry. She could give without being emptied, and that changed everything. Around mid-December, Dana came home with a bag of groceries and a hesitant look. I hope it's okay, she said, but I signed us up for the neighborhood cookie swap. Eleanor blinked. Dana grinned. Well, they thought I lived with my mom. I didn't correct them. Eleanor tried to act annoyed, but she cracked a smile. It had been years since her kitchen buzzed with the activity of shared mess. They baked until flour coated the countertops like snow. Laughed until Scout barked in protest. Dana's playlists filled the airsoft jazz. Then terrible 2000s pop hits, neither of them admitted knowing. As they packed up trays of peppermint thins and gingerbread crumbles. Eleanor wiped her hands on a towel and looked around the room. The walls were the same color. The windows still overlooked the garden, but everything had changed because she had. Dana went away for Christmas back home to see her fiancé and offered to leave the place to Eleanor alone, but Eleanor didn't mind. She spent the holiday with herself. She made her own dinner, stuffing, glazed carrots, cranberry spritzer. She placed one plate in front of Scout, K, and took a ridiculous photo of him sniffing the cranberries suspiciously. She watched the old Christmas specials she and her husband used to love, sipping spiked cocoa and wearing fuzzy socks she'd kept hidden from Amanda, who once called them unflattering. She wore them now like armor. That night, when the stars were bright and silence stretched warm across the walls, Eleanor wrote one more journal page. Christmas alone, but never lonely. Loved by those who know how to love. Seen by myself first. Strong not because I had no choice, but because I finally chose me. The new year arrived without fireworks, just peace. Scout curled beneath her feet, the radiator clicking. Dana upstairs giggling on Zoom. No noise, no grand countdown, and she wouldn't have it any other way. In February, Eleanor received a letter, handwritten, no return address. The paper trembled in her palm as she opened it. Chris's handwriting? Mom, I know I don't have the right words. Amanda and I, we were scared. Of money, of the future, of losing things. But that didn't give us the right to take what was yours. I've replayed 1,000 versions of how I could explain myself. None of them sound good. You didn't deserve silence or betrayal. You deserved a son who saw you as more than convenient. If time allows, I'd like to rebuild slowly. On your terms, from a distance, if that's what it takes. I still remember you dancing in the kitchen when I was 6. I remember you laughing until you cried because I burned the toast. I remember the real you. And I hope, one day, you'll remember the real me. Love. Chris Eleanor sat quietly with the letter for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't rush to write back. She simply folded it neatly and placed it on her bookshelf, filed not under guilt, but under history. Maybe one day, maybe not. The story didn't need that chapter right now. It was hers again. And that was enough. She started volunteering at the local animal shelter, once a week. She walked timid rescues around the block. The staff adored her. The dogs leaned into her touch like they understood something no one else did. One of the girls, barely 20, asked her once, "Were you always this confident?" Eleanor laughed. "No, sweet girl. I was ... polite. I was compliant. I was soft. In all the wrong places. And then one day, someone mistook that softness for surrender." The girl blinked. "What happened?" Eleanor smiled gently. "I remembered who I was before I was told otherwise." Spring arrived like a sigh through the windows, soft and slow, and Eleanor bloomed with it. The trees outside her porch, once skeletal reminders of times passing, now stood full and daring. She sat with Scout beside her, a glass of lemon water. In hand, listening to the birds stake new territory in the air, she no longer craved things to go back. There was no going back, only through, only forward. This new life wasn't loud, it was deliberate. The peace here didn't shout. It settled. She had built a sanctuary of restored furniture, of familiar smells, of laughter in small doses. Dana still lived upstairs, now practically family. Scout now napped in his favorite sunbeam by the window, and Eleanor had joined a walking club called the Silver Souls. It's 5 women all over 60 who'd seen some version of Eleanor's story in their own skin, and they walked together like they owned each sidewalk they stepped on. When the lease was up, Dana invited Eleanor to her wedding. It would be in the mountains of North Carolina. Nothing fancy, just vows under trees, wind sweeping through hair. The kind of honesty that doesn't need decoration. At first, Eleanor hesitated. It's too far, too much, too alone. But then she remembered something she'd written in her journal weeks ago. I will no longer cancel joy just because no one comes with me. She booked a train, packed a light bag, wore the blue floral scarf she used to love but hadn't dared wear while Amanda was around. Too old ladyish, Amanda once said. Eleanor wrapped the scarf proud around her neck. Let them call it what they want. She called it hers. The wedding was beautiful, Dana cried. Her fiancé tripped over a root mid-vow. Eleanor laughed along with the guests, holding a tissue for a stranger who had forgotten hers. At the reception, a man her age asked if she'd like to dance. And for a moment, she felt 17 again, not because of romance, but because she realized she still could. Yes, she said, placing her hand in his. Her knees popped. Her back ached the next morning, and it was worth every second. Back home the next week, Eleanor passed a small mirror in the hallway and suddenly stopped. She saw the lines by her eyes deeper now. And for the first time, she smiled at them. Not despite them, because of them. They were proof. Proof she had laughed. Worried, fought, stayed quiet too long, and then fought again to be here. Now, fully. She took out her phone to capture the moment. Not for social media, just for herself a week later. She entered her study and picked up Scout's photo to clean the frame. It still had remnants of old fingerprints. Amanda used to scold her for displaying clutter, for filling the house with memories. Photos just make the place feel dated, she'd said. Eleanor stared at the image and whispered like a prayer. Then let it be dated. This house is lived in. That afternoon, she did one final symbolic thing. She took Amanda's old key, still hanging in the drawer. Untouched, she opened the front door, stepped outside barefoot like she always did now, and tossed the key into the flower bed. It sank gently between roots and petals, swallowed by the earth that belonged to her. She stood tall. There would be no more locked doors here, only chosen ones, only ones she opened to people who honored them. In her final journal entry, dated exactly 1 year after the surgery that changed everything, she wrote, "They tried to shrink me into thankfulness for what they didn't destroy. But I am not a survivor of shadows. I am a keeper of light. This is my house. This is my voice. This is my life. And yes, this time, it's mine." If you knew someone who needed this story today, someone who's ever felt erased, forgotten, or too old to start over, share Eleanor's journey. Because no woman at any age should have to apologize for taking back what J.era Della. Subscribe for more true stories of strength, healing, and quiet revolutions. And never forget, your silence is not your weakness. It's your seed for something true.